My name is Ashley, and I'm 27 years old. I was an only child raised by a calm and doting father and a lively, energetic mother. Their marriage was harmonious and joyful, even if Mom could be a bit too spirited at times. In fact, I got married wanting the kind of marriage life they led. Judson is my husband, who I met through a friend. Both my family and Judson's are in the food industry, but his family owns a popular French restaurant. They've achieved great success, operating several outlets in and around New York City. As the heir to the family business, Judson was involved in its operations. While we were dating, his anecdotes about the restaurant and his ambitions were entertaining. However, after marriage, I started to feel a twinge of annoyance whenever my family's business was compared to his. Running a famous restaurant is tough, unlike your family's business, which seems like it's about to go under. Arguing back was exhausting. My family's restaurant was not on the brink of closure, and if I may say so, it was not Judson who was sustaining his family's business. It was Todd. Todd was Judson's cousin from his mother's side. Orphaned as a child, he was taken in by Judson's family. Judson initially referred to Todd as a brother, but in reality, he treated him like a slave. The reason Judson's family business didn't fail was thanks to Todd's competence and his mother. Observing their family business as a daughter-in-law, it was clear that my father-in-law and Judson were simply arrogant. Without Todd and my mother-in-law, Judson's family business would undoubtedly go bankrupt. Their attitudes towards Todd and my mother-in-law, who were the ones contributing, were arrogant. Judson's logic was that since he had saved Todd from being an orphan, it was only natural that Todd should repay the favor. According to my father-in-law, since my mother-in-law was his wife, it was natural for her to serve him. In other words, they were both just pawns to them. Unlike the haughty father-in-law and Judson, my mother-in-law and Todd were kind. After graduating from college at 24, Todd took on a secretary-like role to Judson. My mother-in-law spoke to me, her face filled with sorrow. Todd would have been happier if he had been taken in by other relatives. My husband forcibly adopted him because Todd seemed useful to him. The kind-hearted mother-in-law was worried about Todd. However, she was frustrated that she couldn't openly defend him in front of her husband and Judson. Despite being the heir, Judson was incompetent. That's why he found Todd's competence irritating and was harsh towards him. He often complained about the employees and Todd to me. The employees only follow Todd's instructions. Well, if things go well when Todd gets involved, I think that's fine. The employees know what they need for themselves, too. They show reluctance to follow Judson's orders because they have complaints against him. Todd was struggling to make the employees accept Judson's unreasonable instructions. In fact, Todd and my mother-in-law rarely voiced their opinions. They obediently followed the orders of my father-in-law and Judson. But behind the scenes, they were reworking the foolish strategies of my father-in-law and Judson into appropriate instructions. They were desperately making sure the business didn't fail while saving face for my father-in-law and Judson. That's why the employees respected Todd and my mother-in-law. Since getting married, I've observed Judson, my in-laws, and Todd and came to a realization. My mother-in-law and Todd were wise and competent. They knew that insisting on their way would cause chaos around them. They were gaining the trust of the employees while preserving the dignity of my father-in-law and Judson. On the contrary, my father-in-law and Judson were ignorant and incompetent. They didn't realize that their positions were secured only thanks to the competent people around them. If they were a little smarter, they would cherish my mother-in-law and Todd. They believed they were more competent than anyone else because they were at the top. They looked down on those around them because they overestimated their own abilities. I once told my parents about this when I visited my hometown. My mother said, drinking her loaded potato soup, "Ashley, just get a divorce and come home." My father gave a bitter smile at my mother's active encouragement of my divorce. It was too soon to talk about divorce, as we hadn't even been married for half a year. I was disappointed in Judson and my father-in-law, but my mother-in-law and Todd were good people. I can't just easily get a divorce, I thought, giving a bitter smile. My dad gave a gentle nod, but my mom, sipping her second bowl of pizza soup, suggested, Well, why don't you get a divorce, marry Todd, and come help us out at our pizza shop? Mom, don't say such weird things, I protested heatedly, to which my dad kindly asked, Ashley, are you troubled about something? I sighed at my dad's question. He's gentle but sharp. I gave up and began talking about my issues with Judson. Judson is really a handful. Judson looks down on me, seeing me as just a daughter of a shabby pizza shop owner. That alone is irritating, but there were more problems. Just because I talk with Todd, he suspects me of cheating. Neither Todd nor I have such feelings. Todd is basically a brother-in-law to me. When I discussed it with my mother-in-law, she gave a deep sigh. According to my mother-in-law, there's a female employee Judson was interested in the past. However, that woman admired and liked Todd. Judson, angered, came up with a random excuse and fired her. It may sound rude to you, Ashley, but Judson hates losing to Todd. It was not jealousy, but a distorted sense of competition. Therefore, Todd knows to keep his conversations with me to a minimum. I'm fed up with Judson's selfishness, but Todd, who works closely with me, must be even more exhausted. When I talked about Judson's troublesome personality, my mother made a dumbfounded face. What a petty man. He's too insecure. Don't you think so, honey? Yes, indeed. Talking with my mom and dad like this seemed to dissipate my gloomy mood. My mom has been spirited since she was a child, and my late grandfather had difficulty finding a suitable match for her. She was beautiful and a popular girl in town, but she was too energetic. Since she was the eldest daughter, her family needed a son-in-law to succeed her family business. The men my grandfather introduced to her shrank back from her overly energetic demeanor. My grandfather thought a gentle man would be suitable for his active daughter, and so the arrow pointed to my father. He was the son of my grandfather's close friend, well known for his gentleness and intelligence. When they had their first meeting, it was my mom who fell for my dad. According to my mom, my dad looked like a handsome actor when he was young. Even now, he's known as a refined man by the customers of our pizza shop. My dad, attracted to my mom's lively personality, decided to marry her. As my parents chatted amiably, I remembered an important matter. Can I bring Judson, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and Todd here next time? It was the first time for my in-laws and Todd to visit my parents' home. My mother-in-law wanted to greet my parents again, which is why she asked. My father-in-law and Judson reluctantly agreed. Surprisingly, Todd, interested in making pizza, volunteered to come. My guess is that Todd was concerned that my father-in-law and Judson might behave rudely. My parents were pleased to grant my request. Of course, we'll make them realize how delicious our pizza is. Mom, you're getting too excited. That's how I ended up bringing my in-laws to my parents' pizza shop. I hadn't expected a battleground to lie ahead. Well, actually, I had a nagging feeling something unpleasant was coming. Todd usually steps in when my mother-in-law can't control my father-in-law and Judson. It was certain that a storm was brewing. And then the day came when we all visited my parents' pizza shop. The moment Judson saw my family's pizza shop, he sneered. Still as old-fashioned as ever. It was fortunate that my mother wasn't present in that moment. If she had heard him, Judson would have been banned from our shop right there. As I ignored him and went into the shop, my mom was waiting cheerfully. Welcome, everyone. Long time no see, Judson. Ashley told me a lot about you. She didn't mean it in a good way, though, but I guess Judson didn't get her sarcasm. I don't know what Judson misunderstood, but he looked very flattered. My in-laws didn't get it, but it seemed that Todd did. He was smiling as if he understood the hidden meaning in my mom's words. It was rare for Todd to show his emotions. After my mother had greeted Judson and my in-laws, she turned to Todd. You're Todd, right? So tall and handsome, you look like a model. Overwhelmed by my mother's forcefulness, Todd showed a puzzled smile. Thank you. I'm looking forward to today. He shook her hand politely and headed towards the room where Todd and my in-laws were. My father was in the process of making pizza. When my mother tried to bring out some drinks and our popular side dishes, my father-in-law scoffed. Both the store and your mother are old and dirty. I was both angry and chilled. As I looked, my mom was preparing drinks right in front of me. To be honest, I was too terrified to look directly at my mother's face. As I swallowed my fear, I heard a menacing voice. "Say that again?" My normally cheerful mother's voice, laden with quiet anger, was terrifying. Even though my mother-in-law and Todd tried to stop him, my father-in-law spoke again. "Both the store and the old woman running this place are filthy. I think I'm gonna get food poisoning." My father-in-law's outrageous words were met with Judson's smirking agreement. My furious mother quietly put away the prepared drinks and brought out a 1-liter bottle of wine. She then sharply said to my father-in-law, "Hey, if you don't want your head split open like a watermelon, get out." My father-in-law was taken aback by her forcefulness, but managed to get out a parting shot. Just like the daughter, the mother is also ugly." As my mother started to swing the 1-liter bottle, my father rushed to stop her. My father tried to defuse the situation with a smile, but it was too late. My father-in-law and Judson spat at the entrance of the shop and left. My mom tried to chase after them, but my father and I desperately held her back. "How dare you call me an old woman? Call me miss!" "Mom, that's not what you're supposed to be angry about." Well, everything he said did piss me off, too. As my father and I desperately tried to calm her down, my mom finally calmed down a bit. My mother-in-law and Todd were profusely apologetic, but these two didn't need to apologize. The problem was my father-in-law's and Judson's condescending attitudes. The whole incident was caused by my father-in-law's derogatory comments about my family's home and Judson's amusement at them. I, too, was seething with anger over the heartless insults. My mother-in-law, noticing my state, spoke to me. "Ashley, I'm really sorry. My husband and Judson, they won't change. You can consider divorce for your own sake." Todd seemed to agree and added his own opinion quietly. "Sis, these incidents will continue. It would be best if you distance yourself." Seeing the regretful expressions on my mother-in-law and Todd's faces, I was conflicted. I could divorce, but I felt sorry for my mother-in-law and Todd. While my father and I were at a loss, my mother spoke up bluntly. "You two don't seem happy, especially Todd. You can leave whenever you want, right?" When my mother asked why he allowed himself to be used by a man like Judson, Todd looked at my mother-in-law. "I'm concerned about my aunt. I can't leave her after everything she's done for me." He felt no gratitude towards my father-in-law and Judson, but Todd was considerate of my mother-in-law. Additionally, he worried that if he left, the remaining employees would suffer due to the selfishness of my father-in-law and Judson. His concern for my mother-in-law and sense of responsibility were what held him back. Hearing Todd's true feelings, my mother-in-law began to cry. She felt guilty that Todd couldn't live freely because of her. As my father and I exchanged confused glances, not knowing what to do, my mother tapped Todd and my mother-in-law's shoulders. "Ha, that's easy. Leave it to me." My mother-in-law and Todd were taken aback by my mother's cheerful laughter. My father seemed to sense what my mother was going to do. I made up my mind too. After discussing what to do in the future, I returned home where Judson was waiting. The first thing I said to Judson was, "I'm cutting ties with your family." I declared our separation, unable to forgive my father-in-law's thoughtless words. Judson laughed scornfully, looking neither hurt nor bothered. He was a man incapable of contemplating an apology. "Huh, all right then, let's divorce." He insulted my family's pizza shop and seemed keen on divorce. I shoved the divorce papers I had prepared beforehand at him, and I gave him my final warning. "No matter what happens, don't come crying to me after our divorce." Judson, who didn't seem to understand the meaning, was nonchalant. "I'll pay you alimony, you poor pizza shop girl." I didn't need it, but I nodded so as not to arouse suspicion. And so just half a year later, Judson and I divorced. Excluding the presence of my mother-in-law and Todd, 80% of my life was stress. And with my father-in-law's thoughtless words, it became 100%. After the divorce, I returned to my parents' home. About a month later, my ex-father-in-law and ex-husband Judson came to me, pale-faced. "My wife and Todd are gone. They left divorce papers and a letter saying they were cutting ties with us." I told my ashen-faced ex-father-in-law. "How unfortunate. It's a late-life divorce, isn't it?" As I laughed, Judson, even more pale-faced, spoke up.
Employees who admired Todd quit. I got betrayed by my brother."
As I was astounded by his selfish remarks, a chilly voice rang out.
"Don't call me your brother only when it's convenient for you. I never considered you my brother."
Suddenly, Todd appeared, causing my ex-father-in-law and Judson to be utterly shocked. Then, from the back, my former mother-in-law quietly emerged. While my ex-father-in-law and Judson were dumbfounded, my mother made a gallant appearance.
"These two have been scouted by us, and also we've taken over your French restaurant."
My ex-father-in-law broke out in cold sweat at my mother's declaration. My father, observing the situation, modestly smiled.
"It's nothing like that. Running a pizza shop was merely my hobby. My wife's family owns a group of restaurants, and they were kind enough to accept me as their son-in-law."
When he revealed the name of the company, my ex-father-in-law and Judson lost their footing, as they should have. Their restaurants were no match for the size of our company. There was a reason they had been running a pizza shop instead of being involved in the family business. A few years ago, my father had collapsed from overworking. Doctors suggested he should do something he enjoyed for his recovery. That's why my mother and I reopened this pizza shop my late grandfather used to run as a hobby. In other words, they just went undercover by running a pizza shop. During my parents' absence, their dedicated and skilled employees were running the company. My parents were actually overseeing their work while running the pizza shop. This was only possible because my parents were greatly admired by their staff. Under my mother's direction, our company took over the restaurant run by my ex-father-in-law and Judson. While they were complacent, the situation had changed. To the stunned ex-father-in-law and Judson, my father calmly said,
"Based on what I've seen, I've judged that you both lack the abilities to manage a business. The employees have also voiced their concerns with your management skills, so we demand your resignation."
Standing next to my father, who was gently issuing a terrifying announcement, my mother firmly said,
"We're leaving the management of the French restaurant to Todd. Todd, you can do whatever you want with these two. Stew them, roast them, crush them, you name it."
Ex-father-in-law Judson protested.
"You can't do that without our approval."
But it was futile. This was not just my parents' decision, but the will of all the employees who were upset with their boss, my ex-father-in-law and Judson. My ex-mother-in-law would now be in a supporting role for Todd, her nephew. In other words, Todd and my ex-mother-in-law now had the right to fire my ex-father-in-law and Judson. Todd exchanged glances with ex-mother-in-law and calmly said,
"I owe you for taking me in when I was a child."
My ex-father-in-law Judson had a moment of hope at Todd's kind smile, but it was fleeting. Todd changed his expression with an icy voice declared,
"But I have a grudge 100 billion times greater than that. For Judson, it's 500 billion times greater."
In short, he would neither forgive nor be merciful. Todd declared that he was stripping my ex-father-in-law Judson of all their managerial authority. Then, my ex-mother-in-law said something even more horrifying.
"I'd rather you vanish from my sight, but I'll keep you on as low-level workers."
Watching this spectacle, I felt a deep realization. People like my mother, who readily express their emotions, are actually much more predictable. Of course, my mother has her limits, but knowing when she'll act on her anger helps me stay mentally prepared. The most frightening are people like my ex-mother-in-law and Todd, who take on a lot of crap until it reaches their limit and goes off. The fact that they can bear insensitive words and deeds is proof of their strong core and kindness. My short-sighted ex-father-in-law and Judson had underestimated these two, and the situation had turned for the worst. It wasn't just the divorce with me, they had lost valuable human resources. Foolish people take for granted that kind people will forgive whatever they do. As a result, those who've reached their limit of patience have revolted, deemed unfit as managers, being turned away even by their close relatives. My ex-father-in-law and Judson were ousted. Working under Todd was humiliating for Judson, and he started crying. My ex-father-in-law yelled at Todd, calling him ungrateful, but it was too late. Although Todd holds a debt to gratitude, he harbors a grudge 100 billion times greater. Watching my ex-father-in-law Judson slink away in retreat, I said, "The mouth is indeed the gate of the evil." At my words, my father smiled.
"Angering your mother was the end of their luck."
As I observed my softly smiling father, I thought, it was him who went off, though. My father is a devoted husband to my mother, a man who would not hesitate to bring ruin upon those who dared to insult his beloved wife, all with a smile on his face. Afterward, my ex-father-in-law Judson disappeared, having received some severance pay. It must have been humiliating for them to work under my ex-mother-in-law and Todd's surveillance. Although they should have quit, they used their severance pay to start a new business, which ultimately failed. The French restaurant was actually expanded by my ex-father-in-law's parents. My ex-father-in-law never had the skills to expand his business. Now, my ex-mother-in-law and Todd are managing the French restaurant entrusted to them. They were excellent managers who gained the trust of their employees. Todd, always quiet, had gradually become more comfortable with expressing his emotions. After telling my parents that I wanted to enjoy working in the pizza restaurant for a bit longer, I continued to work in the food service industry, something I've done since before I was married. I worked together with my colleagues who I had known for some time. One day, on my day off, I went to my parents' pizza restaurant and saw my ex-mother-in-law there. She seemed to be consulting with my mother about something. I asked if anything had happened to my father, to which they informed me,
"Todd is about to turn 25. He's upset about being so focused on work and not having a girlfriend."
"You shouldn't have to worry about that." I sighed, but then heard my mother's lively voice. "There are countless girls who would want to marry a handsome and good man like Todd." I realized, then, that my mother was enthusiastic about introducing him to potential marriage prospects. But Todd might already have someone in mind. I was worried that they were being too forceful by arranging a meeting without asking him first. When I appealed to my father about it, he just smiled. Then I heard my mother calling me. Looking at my face, she smirked. "You've been listening to our conversation, right?" "Yes, I was, but Mom, you can't just set up a marriage meeting without asking Todd first." When I desperately objected, both my ex-mother-in-law and my mother laughed together. Feeling perplexed and unsure about what was happening, my ex-mother-in-law told me, "We know who Todd likes, but he just can't seem to say it himself." Then my mother continued, "Todd said he likes you, Ashley, but because you're like his sister-in-law, he feels hesitant." I was shocked because I hadn't noticed Todd's feelings. He's the type to keep things to himself, so much that I was completely unaware. Even though I thought he was a wonderful man, I didn't immediately feel any romantic feelings for him. When I shared my feelings honestly with my mother and my ex-mother-in-law, my father chimed in.
"It's okay. Todd said he'd take his time and gradually make you fall for him."
"Dad, I wish you kept that to yourself." At my outburst, both my mother and my ex-mother-in-law burst into laughter. And so, that's how I came to know that Todd was quietly nursing a one-sided love for me. I knew it would take forever for Todd to confess his feelings for me, so I asked him out first. Looking back, it was a clever strategy on Todd's part. Although we started off as a couple, I later asked him when he had started developing romantic feelings for me. At my question, Todd just smiled enigmatically. He never answered my question, but after 2 years of dating, we got married. In hindsight, my calm father and thoughtful Todd were quite similar. Only later did I laugh at the realization that my mom and I had similar tastes when it came to men.
The discovery after marriage was a shock. My in-laws had a debt of $15 million, and for some reason, I was supposed to pay it off. I thought I would try my best for the sake of the family, but then I noticed something. It was unforgivable. They were just enjoying themselves behind my back, planning to use me to pay off their debt. From that moment on, I started a certain plan to plunge my husband and in-laws, who would be overjoyed that the debt was paid off 5 years later, into hell. I am Susan. I lost my mother at a young age and lived with my father, who also passed away a few years ago. The person who encouraged me when I was feeling down for being alone was my old friend. It was through her that I met my husband, Lawrence. I met Lawrence when I went out for a drink with my friend after a long time, and we ended up drinking together. He had just been dumped by his girlfriend and was complaining about it over drinks.
"I'm lonely. Is my life supposed to be like this?"
Hearing that, it was friend who suggested in high spirits, "Susan is single right now, right? Why don't you two just date?" My friend in high spirits arranged for Lawrence and I to exchange contacts and even set up the next date. It was somewhat forced, but she seemed to have noticed that Lawrence was my type, as expected, a friend who has known me for a long time. I was a little excited about the date with Lawrence that was set up. To put it bluntly, we had so much fun that it didn't feel like our first date. After that, we started dating almost every week. When we first met, you had just broken up with your previous girlfriend, right? Why did you break up with her?
Well, let's not talk about the past. You're here with me now, Susan.
Lawrence was kind and fun to talk to. I wondered why he was dumped by his previous girlfriend, but at the time, I didn't really care. After dating for about a year, Lawrence proposed to me. Of course, there was no reason to refuse. With joy, I chose to become his wife. When I nervously visited his parents' house for the first time, my in-laws welcomed me. Susan, you work for a major corporation, don't you? That's amazing. Yes? Do you plan to continue working after marriage? Yes, I do. It's good to have a dual income. It will give us some leeway in our lives. My stay-at-home mother-in-law surprisingly supported my job. I was a bit relieved, thinking I would be told to quit my job and take care of the household. Lawrence also agreed that I should continue working after marriage. Thus, without any particular trouble with my in-laws, my married life started. We bought a house under my name, and just when I was thinking about our future, Lawrence came to me with a serious look and said,
I have something to tell you. The truth is, my family has debt.
Huh? I had never heard such a story before. How much is the debt?
At first, it wasn't so much, but as the repayment was delayed, it just kept growing.
I asked with trepidation. Just tell me, how much is the debt?
About $15 million.
That?
Even if we try to pay it back, my parents are living on their pension, right? They can't pay it back as much as they want to, and the debt is just growing.
I see.
Susan, before we got married, you mentioned that Mr. Father-in-law has some inheritance, right? Frankly speaking, how much is that?
The conversation took a turn I wasn't expecting. I had a nagging suspicion, and unfortunately, I was right. Lawrence asked,
Can't we use the inheritance you got from your father to pay back my parents' debt?
Why should I? I have got my own mortgage to pay.
It's not manageable if you continue to pay little by little.
What about your savings, Lawrence?
I have no savings.
But before we got married, you said you had some money put aside, remember?
Well, that was... I was just going with the flow trying to match, Susan. I really don't have any savings, that's why only you can handle it.
Lawrence tried to persuade me with all his might. Even though it was highly unfair, I knew we couldn't just ignore the debt. The problem was, I didn't have as much as $15 million in savings. I only have $10 million from the inheritance. What about the rest?
We both earn good money, right? Plus, you do a lot of overtime. I want you to use that overtime pay to repay the debt.
So he was implying that I should use all the money I inherited from my father and my hard-earned money to repay the debt? Looking at his face, it seemed that there was no way out of this other than me helping him out. Fortunately, it was not an impossible sum if we combined the inheritance and my salary. I reluctantly agreed to his request. Later, my in-laws showed up at our place. Susan, you're going to repay our debt for us? Thank you so much. Lawrence replied to my tearful and grateful mother-in-law with a proud look.
Mom, you should thank me too. If I hadn't married Susan, things wouldn't have turned out this well.
Well, you're right about that. I thought she was a good person from the first time I met her. There's no doubt about your good judgment, Lawrence. Even my father-in-law was overjoyed, hugging Lawrence.
Well done, Lawrence. Now we can walk around proudly without worrying about debt collectors.
We can finally afford to eat out.
Let's celebrate by grilling some steaks.
Agreed. I watched my husband and his parents giddy with joy with a stupefied expression. They owed money, and it wasn't like they were the ones repaying it, and they were talking about eating out and having steaks. Perhaps noticing my exasperated look, Lawrence finally quieted them down.
Hey, calm down, both of you. This is exactly why your debts keeps increasing. You spend money frivolously and you can't even do basic calculations.
As Lawrence scolded them, my mother-in-law retaliated. Isn't that the same for you, Lawrence?
Why me?
You have always been a show-off, Lawrence. When you liked a girl, You would go on expensive dates and give gifts, even if it meant borrowing money. And when your lack of funds was revealed, you ended up getting dumped, remember?
What? I've learned from my past mistakes. That's why I married Susan, who doesn't need me to spend money. Isn't that smart of me?
Well, it did help us out, that's for sure. I see. So that's why Lawrence kept quiet about the reason he was dumped by his previous girlfriend? Listening to Lawrence and his parents' conversation, it felt like he married me for my money, and it made me uncomfortable. The way they were talking about repaying the debt, it was as if they were openly saying Lawrence is a smart one for landing a cash cow. My mother-in-law continued speaking. Lawrence has always had this tell. Whenever he's got a girl he likes, he starts spending money like crazy, you know? Upon hearing this, I realized something. Recently, he had been withdrawing money frequently from our household account. Could it be... Ignoring my suspicion, Lawrence, seemingly struck by a brilliant idea, spoke up.
Exactly, Susan. You've been sending money to my parents' house every month, right? But our family is notoriously bad at managing money. So from now on, could you send it directly to the debtor instead?
What? I was confused by the sudden and selfish proposal. However, my in-laws reacted with exaggerated enthusiasm. Oh, what a great idea. Here, Susan, this is the account number for the transfer. My mother-in-law said, handing me a piece of paper with the account number on it. And how much will you be able to repay each month? How many years until it's all paid off? She asked as if it was someone else's issue. Though I was irritated, I responded, firstly, I'll allocate the $10 million from the inheritance to repay the debt, so there's only $5 million left. If we can pay between $800 and $900 each month, I think we can finish in about 5 years. 5 years, huh? I guess it can't be helped if it takes that long. And so I ended up repaying my in-laws' debt bit by bit. First, I sent the $10 million from the inheritance to the creditors as a lump sum. This should keep them at bay for a while, but then I discovered something. My husband had been having an affair behind my back. No wonder his spending habits had gotten out of hand. I won't stand for him having all the fun. If that's how he wants to play it, I'll play it too. He is in for a surprise in 5 years. For the next 5 years, I handled all communications with the creditors while my husband and in-laws went about their lives as usual. All this for my secret plan. I looked forward to the shock on their faces 5 years later. And then one day, 5 years later, Lawrence, looking at the bank card, said,
Good job, Susan. You've been making consistent payments each month, and now the remaining $5 million is fully paid.
Yes, that's right.
I'm really grateful to you, and I actually have something important to talk about.
Something important?
I want us to break up.
Lawrence said it with a straight face.
Now that the debt problem is nearly resolved, there's a girl I want to be with. If we break up, she's going to live here. So you should go to, my parents' house.
What? I immediately got defensive. Hold on. Why do I have to go to your parents' house?
She doesn't like dealing with the in-laws and all that. My parents are still terrible with money. It would be easier for you to manage them if you live together, right?
You said you want to break up, didn't you? Even so, you still want me to take care of your parents? That doesn't make any sense at all.
My parents are completely dependent on you. You should take care of them until the end. Besides, if they accumulate debt again, it's going to be a real pain to repay. And by its, I mean your pain,
he said, laughing. A husband who dumped the task of debt repayment onto his wife and enjoyed an affair in secret. Not only that, but he also planned to have me take care of his parents after our divorce. While he lived with his new woman, I would never allow it. There is no way I would let that happen. I am fed up with Lawrence's selfishness. Barely controlling my anger, I replied with an attempt at calmness. I completely agree with the divorce.
Oh, good thing you're understanding.
But you're the one who's leaving.
Huh? What are you talking about? This is my house.
That's not quite right. Remember when we bought this house? The entire down payment came from my savings, and didn't we put it in my name?
Did we?
At the time you said, I don't want to be the one responsible for the loan if something happens. That's why I don't want the house in my name. I should have been more suspicious then. Had I realized how irresponsible you were, I wouldn't have wasted so much time.
Huh? Well, whatever. You're out of money, and it would be a shame if you had nowhere to live. I'll let you stay.
Out of money?
Yeah, right. You've used up all your inheritance to pay off debts, and you've transferred all your extra income. You must be flat broke.
I do have some savings.
What? There's no way you do. I just checked your transfer history.
Then you should understand all my money is in another account. At this, Lawrence looked momentarily taken aback, then panicked.
Wait. What do you mean another account?
He frantically double-checked his bank book. It was then that Lawrence finally realized that the account I had been depositing money into every month was separate from the one we were using to pay off our debts.
So, what about my parents' debt?
Of course, that's still there. Since you left dealing with creditors entirely up to me, you probably didn't notice what was happening on my end. Upon hearing this, Lawrence's face turned pale as a sheet.
You've been tricking me all along?
Tricking you? Aren't you guilty of the same?
Whoa, what are you talking about?
You have been having an affair behind my back, haven't you? At this, Lawrence froze.
When did I ever cheat on you?
You would know better than me, right? I found out about it 5 years ago.
5 years ago?
I became suspicious after a conversation I overheard between you and my mother-in-law. Apparently, whenever you get a new girlfriend, you start spending money recklessly. That's when I noticed your spending habits change.
No way, you can't be serious.
I suspected something, so I kept a close eye on you. I kept seeing signs of a woman in your life. Once I confirmed the affair, I decided to move the money I had been planning to use to pay off the debt to a separate account instead, to secure a living for myself after I divorced you, Lawrence. Upon hearing the truth, Lawrence was stunned for a moment.
I need to call my parents.
In response to Lawrence's call, his parents rushed to our house. They must have already heard about the situation because they came at me with fury.
Susan, what do you mean you haven't been paying off the debt?
Facing my father-in-law, who was red with rage, I replied in a cold tone. Why would I be obligated to pay off the debts of someone who will soon be a stranger? Besides, it's unthinkable to give my salary to a husband who betrayed me.
A stranger? Betrayed? What on earth are you talking about?
Father-in-law looked confused. I didn't miss the flustered expression on my mother-in-law's face standing next to him. Mother-in-law, you understand what I'm talking about, don't you? I don't know. Playing dumb won't help you. It was your own mother who enlightened me about the telltale signs when Lawrence becomes infatuated with a new woman. She can't miss it, but that is... So, it's not just about money. It seems your moral compass is also a bit shaky, isn't it? That's rude. I just want Lawrence to be happy. Lawrence's happiness, huh? So it's okay to trample on my happiness, the one who has been paying off your son's debts? You're quite a monster. At that, Lawrence's mother fell into an uncomfortable silence. Then his father, looking regretful, appealed to me.
Susan, I'm really sorry for what my son did. Can't you forgive him and let it go? The money he shifted to another account, it was probably just out of spite, right?
After saying this, Lawrence's father scolded him.
What on earth are you doing, cheating on such a wonderful wife for another woman? Apologize sincerely and beg for Susan's forgiveness, and return the money in the account for paying off the debt.
I sighed heavily. It seems their nature hasn't changed one bit since 5 years ago. They're just obsessed with their own debts. I don't care how much you apologize. I'm not planning to forgive you. I don't intend to become a part of your family either. He seems to want to divorce quickly and be with his new girlfriend, so why not leech off her this time? Unable to bear my words any longer, Lawrence shouted,
I can't let her do that.
Hearing this, I totally lost it. So, it's fine for me to do it, but not her? What do you think people are?
That's not... You've always been understanding and listened to me, but she's selfish and it's hard when she's upset.
Well, you're right. I listen to you too much. There are parts I need to reflect on. So from now on, I'll do as I please. First of all, I'll make sure to claim compensation for your cheating. And I'll have you return the $10 million from my father's inheritance that was used for debt repayment. At this, both Lawrence and his father panicked.
Whoa, wait a minute. You know I don't have any savings. I can't possibly pay compensation.
I don't care. Why don't you ask your girlfriend to help you pay, just like you did to me? But just so you know, I'll be claiming compensation from her too.
Even from her? She might break up with me if I do that.
Oh, what cheap affection. If she can't even be prepared for that much, why would she meddle with a married man?
Susan, please reconsider.
Lawrence's father also started begging me.
Susan, we are begging you. We can't survive if we go back to being in debt.
In response, I shrugged dramatically. Well, I understand. Your parents, father-in-law and mother-in-law are struggling enough with paying out their remaining $5 million in debt.
So, does this mean we don't have to pay back the inheritance portion of $10 million?
That's right, I won't be demanding it from your parents. Seeing their relief, Lawrence looked at me expectantly.
Then you'll withdraw the compensation claim against me too. If you've given up on the inheritance, then give up on the compensation as well.
What? Are you kidding? Why would I give up on getting back my father's precious inheritance?
But you just said I won't claim the $10 million.
Yes, from your parents. Instead, I'll add the $10 million refund to the compensation from you.
What? You're joking, right? Don't you have a heart?
I'll give you back those words just as they are. You took away my father's inheritance, and behind the scenes, you were having an affair. That's not something a person with a decent heart does.
Susan, I'm begging you.
Quiet. I never want to see your face again. From now on, we'll communicate through a lawyer. Bye. After yelling at Lawrence, I stormed out of the house. I went straight to the lawyer's office and told them everything that had happened. A month later, I completed the divorce and compensation claim procedures through the lawyer and finally cut ties with Lawrence and my in-laws. Though I didn't get the full amount, we settled on a compensation amount that was significantly more than average. Lawrence, with no savings, was buried in debt just like his parents, but that's a fitting end for that family. Thanks to making forceful deposits into a separate account for these past 5 years, I was able to save quite a bit of money at a fast pace. With the compensation money as well, I think I'll treat myself to some good food and do what I enjoy for a while. Once I've refreshed, I feel like I will be ready to tackle whatever comes next with renewed vigor.
Idiots who can't speak aren't family. We're giving her to the hag. Get out. What on earth are you doing? I pushed past my defiant son and his wife, protectively hugging my granddaughter, who was clutching her cheek in pain, glaring at them. The unrepentant couple continued to belittle their mute daughter. Unable to stand it anymore, I decided to raise my granddaughter myself and took her home. 10 years later, when we returned to our home country from overseas, my son and his wife showed up. We missed you. We're family, aren't we? Let's live together. Idiots aren't family. Please go back. My name is Margaret Patterson, a 60-year-old housewife. A few years ago, I lost my husband, and I've been living alone in a large house. I considered living with my son, Jack, and his wife, Mary, but I decided it would be better to live separately. For some reason, I just couldn't get along with my own child and his wife. Besides, I might end up helping out in the bar they run. My body isn't as agile as it used to be, and embarrassingly enough, I'm not good at customer service. If we were to live and work together, it would probably stress us both out. So I decided not to live together. Even after my husband passed away and I started living alone, Jack never suggested we live together. I appreciated that. I was finally free from child rearing and caring for my husband, so I decided to enjoy my time alone. But once I started living alone, it was lonelier than I had thought. I didn't have any hobbies or friends, as I had spent all my time on housework, child rearing, and caregiving. I spent every day watching reruns of TV dramas to pass the time. Even when I tried to establish new habits, they didn't last long. For me, living such a boring daily life, the presence of my two granddaughters was very significant. Emily, the eldest, is 10 years old, and the second daughter, Lily, is 6 years old. They're both very cute girls. Emily is beautiful and good at acting like an adult. On the other hand, Lily is a bit clumsy and quiet. She's often compared to her beautiful and mature older sister, and she feels lonely. I love both of them, but I was particularly on Lily's side. I could see that she seemed to be disliked by both her parents and Emily. My son and his wife, Jack and Mary, would bring my granddaughters to visit about once every 2 months. "Grandma!" Emily would run to me with an innocent smile. Her clothes were always new, and her long hair was always adorably done up. On the other hand, Lily's clothes were always Emily's worn-out hand-me-downs. Her hair was also left untamed and messy. Lily loved to talk and was chatty since she started to speak. But recently, she became quieter, and unlike Emily's bright smile, Lily often looked down with a gloomy face. After greeting Emily with a "nice to see you," I crouched down in front of Lily and spoke to her. "Lily dear, welcome. Thank you for coming." "I prepared some of your favorite sweets today. Let's eat together."
Grandma, what about my sweets?
"Of course, I have yours too. Let's go." As I held hands with the girls, Jack and Mary got out of the car and called out to me. "Hey Mom, long time no see. Here's a souvenir." "Oh, thank you. Have you two been well? Please, make yourselves at home." "Thank you, Mother-in-law." I welcomed my son and my daughter-in-law and granddaughters into my house, served them tea and sweets, and entertained them. Jack and Mary would talk only with Emily and not pay any attention to Lily. Whenever I tried to speak to Lily, Emily would interrupt, or Jack and Mary would start a different topic. I was concerned about their attitude towards Lily, but I thought it best not to interfere too much and just kept an eye on them. However, I would later regret this approach. One day, I had plans to visit Jack and Mary's house and brought along some sweets that they and the girls liked. Upon arriving at their house, I reached out to ring the doorbell. Just then, I heard Jack yelling something from inside the house. "Why don't you say something instead of just being quiet?" I was shocked. As I reached for the front door, it opened easily. Without hesitation, I removed my shoes, and as I walked down the hallway, I could hear the voices coming from upstairs.
You know it's because you don't talk at school that I'm being embarrassed, right?
As I climbed the stairs, the shouting continued, followed by a sharp, dry sound. Upon opening the door from where the sound came, I found Jack and Mary scolding Lily, who was sitting on the floor, while Emily was waving her hand as if in pain. Lily was about to cry and holding her cheek, and Emily seemed to be in pain, waving her hand around. "Hey, Lily, you got smacked by your sister, didn't you? How about saying it hurts? If you can't speak, you're no longer family. Get out. We'll send you to Hag's home." "What the hell are you guys doing?" I brushed aside my son and his wife and Emily, hugged Lily, who was sitting on the floor to protect her, and glared at them. The three of them were momentarily surprised, but quickly regained their composure. "Mom, what are you doing barging in like that? You should have rang the doorbell first." "That's right, Margaret. Aren't you rude?" "What's rude is what you guys are doing. Surrounding and berating a little girl? Jack, aren't you a father? Aren't you ashamed to mistreat your child? And Emily, why did you hit your sister?" For the first time, I scolded Emily loudly. She seemed scared for a moment, but lowered her head and said, "'Cause..." Mary pulled Emily towards her, hugged her, and glared at me. "Please don't blame Emily." I glared back without backing down. Protecting Emily, who hit her sister, is not the right response for a mother. Jack, who was watching, pointed at me and yelled, "Mom, what are you thinking? Get away from that idiot." "The idiots are you guys. Apologize to Lily." "Huh? Who's going to apologize? Neither Jack, Mary, nor Emily seemed to show any remorse and relentlessly insulted Lily. Lily, who was in my arms, was grabbing my clothes weakly with a vacant look on her face. Had they been doing this to her all along? Before I could think, I lifted Lily and declared, "I will take care of Lily. I can't leave her here." Leaving the 3 stunned people behind, I stormed out of the room. After standing still for a while, Jack came running up with a smirk on his face. "Thanks, Mom. I didn't know how to handle this mute." As I was stunned by my son's words, Mary appeared from behind. She was holding a tattered little carry-on bag and a backpack.
This is Lily's stuff. Please take care of the rest,
Mary said, passing the bags roughly to me. Both Lily and I were speechless, looking up at the faces of my son and my daughter-in-law. They were clearly pleased that Lily was leaving their home. Astonished, I left their house without saying a word. In silence, I returned home and took off Lily's shoes at the entrance. Then she sniffled. Looking at Lily's face, I saw her biting her lip with tears streaming down. I hugged Lily, gently patting her on the back. "Lily, it's been hard on you. I'm sorry I couldn't help you until now. But it's going to be okay. Grandma is on your side now. I will protect you." From that day, Lily and I started living together. Because of the hurt she'd experienced from her parents, she stopped speaking. Even a simple good morning seemed impossible for her to vocalize. Her teacher told me that she had been unable to communicate with her classmates or teachers at school. Worried, I took her to the hospital for a medical checkup. Lily was diagnosed with selective mutism. The doctor speculated that the extreme stress she had suffered from her parents and sister had caused severe anxiety and fear, making her unable to speak even if she tried. The doctor reassured me that as she got used to her new environment, she would gradually be able to speak again. On the way home from the hospital, I bought Lily a cute notebook and a pen. "Listen, Lily, if you have something you want to tell me or anyone else, write it in this notebook. Draw pictures or write words. Then try to voice the words you wrote, even just a little at a time, okay?" Lily quickly opened the notebook and began writing with the pen. As I silently watched, she showed me the page she had been writing on. On it were the words, "Thank you, Grandma," along with a sketch of my face. Lily opened her mouth and tried to say, that, but she couldn't get the words out and looked down, disappointed. "Lily, you're doing great. Keep it up one step at a time. Well done. Gold star for you." As I patted her head, Lily looked up and managed a faint smile. She started using the notebook and pen I bought for her to communicate at school. I guess she's gaining confidence. She gradually learned to speak, and 2 years later, she could speak normally.
Grandma, today at school."
The moment Lily returned home, she'd report to me about the happenings at school. Seeing how she'd fully recovered and was brimming with life put my mind at ease. Then, one day, I visited the school for a 3-way conference. Upon entering the classroom, a kind-looking teacher greeted us. Both Lily and I responded with a "hello, teacher," and took our seats. As I discussed Lily's behavior at school and at home, she shyly squirmed in her seat. "Lily's grades have been consistently improving since last year. Take a look at this," the teacher said, showing us her report card. The chart indicated a steady upward trend since she began living with me and had shot up significantly recently. I'm sure it's because she's so dedicated to studying. She's been reading difficult books and solving complex problems almost every day, I explained, patting Lily's head. Ever since she learned to speak, she'd been passionate about studying. At home, she'd delve into complex books and study, and on test day, she'd present me with perfect scores. I framed and hung all her perfect test papers, looking at them with a sense of pride. I see. In that case, how about taking an IQ test at the hospital? Suggested the teacher. IQ test? When I asked for clarification, the teacher explained, Lily might be gifted. Gifted refers to children who are naturally very intelligent. Lily seemed to be just as smart, if not more so, than an adult. The teacher suggested that it might be worth getting an IQ test done so that we could provide an educational environment suitable for her exceptional talents. So I immediately took Lily to the hospital for an IQ test. As the teacher had suspected, Lily was indeed gifted. I was amazed to find out that Lily had such an amazing ability. When I asked her, "How did you find the studies in elementary school? Is it fun?" she responded with a bored expression.
Well, to be honest, it's too easy and I find it boring. I want to study something more challenging, but if I tell the teacher, they get confused.
Hearing her words, I started to ponder. I wondered if Lily could pursue the kind of studies she wished for in America. The studies that Lily desires are probably at a middle school or high school level. I wondered if Lily, who has not yet graduated from elementary school, could handle this. I consulted with her homeroom teacher. The teacher then told me about the grade skipping system in the US. The teacher suggested that if Lily went to America, she could pursue the study she desired. It reminded me that my late husband's brother was working in America. I hadn't been in touch with him since my husband passed away, but he might be able to help. As soon as I reached out and consulted with him, he said he would support our life in the US. Relieved, I suggested to Lily the idea of studying abroad in America.
I want to go if it's with Grandma, but I want to graduate from elementary school with my friends first.
All right, I understand. I'll also learn English by the time you graduate. At that response, Lily smiled relieved. She made many memories in elementary school and graduated without any issues. Since we exchanged contact information, she can communicate with her friends even overseas. I decided not to mention the study abroad plan to Jack and Mary. I thought they might try to take her back if they found out Lily was gifted in order to use her. Lily quickly adjusted to life in the US and studied by skipping grades. I supported her with all my might. When I saw Lily saying,
"Studying is more fun than before,"
I truly felt glad that we came to the US. Her talent is truly incredible. After a few years of studying in the US, she enrolled in Harvard University, studied business, and before I knew it, she had started her own company. "I want to repay my grandma," Lily said enthusiastically. "For me, she's already repaid me enough." After all, Lily has grown up and become a wonderful adult. Her achievements were featured on American news, spread worldwide, and she became a celebrity. In all likelihood, Lily's name is known in the worldwide as well. I wonder what Jack and Mary think of her achievements. I would be happy if they regret how they've treated her. 10 years after Lily started her company, for work reasons, Lily and I returned back to our country. We rented a new apartment, and while we were living there, the doorbell rang. I thought it might be a circulated notice, and without any suspicion, I opened the door. "It's been a while, Mom. Have you been doing well?" "Jack, and Mary too, why are you here?" Upon seeing the two faces, I couldn't help but shudder. I had changed my contact information and was living far away from the house I had lived in before. How did they find me here? Ignoring my surprise, Mary called out into the house. "Hey, Lily, you're here, right? It's your mom. I've come to see you after such a long time." "What do you want? Please don't approach my daughter." "Don't be cold, Mom. We are Lily's parents after all." "That's right, Mother-in-law. Lily's here, right? Please let us meet her." "Wait, don't just barge in like that." Without giving me a chance to stop them, the two of them pushed past me and entered the house. As I was trying to stop them, Lily peeked out from the living room. "What's wrong, Grandma?" "Wait, what?" Lily, too, seemed surprised by the sudden visitors. I awkwardly turned my face away. On the other hand, my son and his wife seemed delighted to finally see Lily. "Oh, Lily, I've missed you. You've grown so much." As Mary reached out to hug her, Lily brushed off her arms. If you want to talk, I'll listen in the living room. I'll prepare some tea, so please wait on the sofa. With a cold statement, Lily began preparing tea in the kitchen. Jack and Mary unreservedly plopped themselves down on the sofa and started reminiscing with her one-sidedly. Growing concerned, I called out to Lily. She winked at me, signaling to leave it to her. When I sat down opposite them, I was immediately confronted with the main issue. The pub my son and his wife were running had gone out of business due to poor management. Their older daughter Emily had also gone off the grid since she started working, and they had no idea what she was doing or where she was now. Jack and Mary, having lost their jobs, were currently living in poverty and had no idea when they would run out of savings. Hey, Lily, would you consider supporting us? You ran away from home at 6, but until then, we raised you. You should pay your respects. Lily, you must have felt lonely not being able to see us all this time, right? But let's live together from now on. Let's create memories as a family, making up for the time we were apart. I couldn't stand to watch my son and his wife pathetically pleading with Lily. While it pains me to say this about my own son, I just can't understand how he turned out this way. Where did I go wrong in raising him? Lost in my own guilt, I was snapped back to reality by Lily's voice. Idiots aren't my family. My only family is Grandma. Please see yourselves out. She wore a cool smile I had never seen before. But Lily... Wait, please. Regardless of their pleas to live together, Lily didn't budge. She forcefully pushed them out the front door, locking it with a definitive click. Looking out the window, I could see my son and my daughter-in-law slinking away with slumped shoulders. Grandma, what is it, dear? Should we move? With those words, she laughed. She apparently had been secretly planning to build a house for us to live in together. She designed it with accessibility in mind for my sake. Thank you, Lily. As I thanked her, she blushed and gave an embarrassed laugh. Several months later, we moved into our new home. Thanks to the accessible features Lily planned, I'm living comfortably. Our shared memories are framed and displayed on the walls. Even the notebook and pen we bought when we first started living together are there. Every time I see them, I'm moved to tears. Today, I think I'll make Lily's favorite dish for her. With that thought, I headed to the kitchen to start cooking. We don't need you anymore. Get out, you work-from-home freeloader. With my sister's words, even my parents joined in the chorus, get out. I'm fed up with a family that treats me and my dog as nuisances. If they're going to take that attitude, then I'll do as I please. Thus began my plan for revenge. My name is Kathy, a 33-year-old single woman. I work as a freelance web designer. My job can be done just with a laptop, so I don't work outside. I have a workspace at home, and I work at my own pace. Despite having such a great job, a disruptive presence began to intrude on my pace 2 years ago. That was my father and mother. One day, while I was working at home, my parents visited me. As soon as they entered the house, they looked around the room and started this conversation. Mom, this house really is big. It seems like we could live here too. That's right. It seems there's even a spare room. Besides, it's a waste for Kathy to live in such a good house by herself. Yeah, let's move in this weekend. Agreed, let's do that. Ignoring my presence, my parents decided everything by themselves. I had no intention of living with them and told them clearly, wait a minute, I have no intention of living with you guys. What are you saying? My father, his face turning red, yelled at me. This house was taken over by you, saying you wanted it from your uncle, trying to make it yours. There's a limit to how low you can go. Take over? I just had a proper conversation with Uncle and he gave it to me. Don't make excuses. Anyway, our old house is falling apart. Your mother and I are moving here this weekend. But Actually, this house was given to me by my father's brother, my uncle who doted on me. The title is still under my uncle's name, but he told me I could use it as I like. According to my father, the family home has become quite old, and a full-scale renovation is needed if we continue to live there. My mother is a housewife, and my father's salary isn't that high, so renovation isn't realistic. So that's why they set their sights on this house that I had inherited from my uncle. I was definitely not thrilled about it, but my parents had already decided to sell their own home and claimed to have no other place to go. I couldn't just leave them hanging, so I reluctantly started living with them. However, the moment they moved in, my parents began throwing sarcastic comments my way. "Hey, Kathy, you're already over 30, aren't you? Don't you have any plans of getting married?" "I'm enjoying my work right now." "Keep talking like that and you'll never get married. Why don't you learn something from your sister?" "My sister's married life isn't going that well, is it? Anyway, I'm fine for now." That's when my mother, who had been listening, interrupted.
Hey, don't badmouth your sister like that. Unlike you, she's married and she's even working for a company, you know.
"I might not be married, but I'm doing a decent job too."
"You're always just messing around on your computer. You're probably making money through some shady means, aren't you?"
"Shady means? I'm making a living doing legitimate work. No need to worry."
"How dare you talk back to your mother? You really are the complete opposite of your sister."
That's how it was. My parents constantly compared me and my sister. Sure, my sister works for a company, but she's just a temp in an office job. I don't look down on temps, but I certainly earn more than she does. I understand that people from my parents' generation don't quite grasp the concept of working from home, but it was still hurtful to be constantly belittled. Then one day, as I was preparing dinner in place of my ever-idle parents, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, it was my sister Sandy, burdened with a huge amount of luggage. "Huh? Sandy, what's going on?"
"Long time no see, Kathy. This is sudden, but I'll be living in this house from today."
As I failed to grasp the situation, I blurted out a bewildered, "Huh?"
"What a large house. If Uncle was going to give it to someone, he should have given it to me."
"Whoa, hold on. Living here from today? I didn't hear anything about this."
"Didn't Mom and Dad tell you? I got divorced, you see."
Divorce?
"So I'll be counting on you from today."
Ignoring my shock, Sandy trudged upstairs and promptly took over an empty room. Despite my best efforts to resist, my parents sided with my sister Sandy, and I couldn't do anything about it. From that moment, my stress just kept piling up. Sandy had quit her job after her divorce, spending her days talking ill of me with our mother.
"Hey, Mom, isn't this dress cute?" "Oh, yes, indeed. Sandy, you're so pretty, it will definitely suit you." "Do you think so, too? It's totally not something Kathy would wear, right?"
"Well, Kathy is a bit plain, you see. That's why she can't get hired anywhere. All she can do is play online at home."
"Mom, you can't just say the truth like that."
By my side, as I was preparing for dinner, they made sure I could hear their conversation. I was dying to retaliate, but doing so would only give them what they wanted. So, no matter what they said, I just continued to live without any reaction. Then, one day, a friend of mine had a litter of 4 puppies, and I decided to adopt one of them. I named him Muffin. He's a little black chihuahua, has the most adorable round eyes. When he looks at me, he wags his tail as if it might break off. Owning a chihuahua has been a dream of mine since I was a child. Working from home can be lonely, so I thought Muffin could provide some much-needed comfort. From today onwards, you're Muffin, okay? Woof! I didn't particularly consult with my family when I decided to adopt him. After all, this is my house, and I am the one who is going to bear all the expenses for Muffin, so I don't see why they should have any complaints. When I brought Muffin home, as expected, my parents and Sandy started complaining. Hey, we didn't hear anything about you getting a dog.
Exactly. Dogs smell, don't they? I hate odors. Kathy, how could you just bring a dog home without consulting us? We didn't approve of this.
As they hurled their complaints at me, I flatly told them, firstly, I didn't pick him up off the street. A friend gave him to me. Also, I'm the one who's going to bear all the expenses for Muffin, so there shouldn't be any issue. What I choose to keep in my house is my business. If you have any complaints, you're free to leave. At first, they complained vehemently, their faces flushed with anger. But within a few hours, they were smitten by Muffin's cuteness and began to fawn over him.
Aren't you cute? Are you mommy?
Are you daddy?
Or are you sis? Look over here, sweetheart.
Wait a minute, what happened to their anger just a moment ago? Was it all a dream? My whole family was utterly fascinated by Muffin. Since then, they were constantly fussing over Muffin. Thanks to this, their hostility towards me had lessened, and I was able to spend relatively calm days. Then, one day, an event occurred that broke this tranquility. While I was out for an errand, I received a call from my sister, Sandy. Hello?
Come back home now.
What? In response to my sister's sudden shout, I asked, what happened? She vented her anger, shouting back at me.
It's not what happened. Muffin did his business on my clothes. What if they smell?
Oh, that? Just wash it quickly and it'll be fine. And isn't it your fault for leaving your clothes all over the floor?
What? It's my fault. It's your poor training that's to blame.
Enough. Muffin is still a puppy, you know. If you take him out for a walk, he won't do his business at home. You said you were excited to walk Muffin today. Did you actually take him?
Well, I was going to take him later, and it's all because you didn't teach him properly. Pay me for the clothes.
As expected, when I got home, my sister was extremely angry. Both my parents had been informed, and they were glaring at me, standing with Sandy. Sandy threw the soiled clothes at me and started freaking out again.
I'm going to charge you for the cleaning costs, okay?
Why should I? It's because you didn't take him for a walk and left your clothes thrown on the floor.
Shut up! Don't talk back! It's because you brought this stupid dog home that this happened. What are you going to do about it?
Stupid dog? You were quite fond of him before. Isn't it harsh to call him a stupid dog just because he had a little accident?
It's because you're poor training. Take responsibility.
Why can't my family think of anything other than their own convenience? While I was appalled by my selfish sister, my parents chimed in. Hey, Kathy, shouldn't you at least apologize to Sandy first?
That's right. All of this happened because of that muffin you brought home.
Can both of you give it a rest already? Puppies are like babies. Can't you forgive them for making mistakes once in a while? Pathetic. This situation only happened because of this stupid dog.
Kathy, you made the right choice by not getting married. If you became a mother, I doubt you'd raise a decent child.
What? How dare you say something like that? If you took it for walks properly and kept the house tidy, none of this would have happened. Finally, my sister raised her eyebrow and pointed at me and said,
I can't take it anymore. I don't need you or this dumb dog. Get out of this house.
What?
Didn't you hear me? I said, get out. We don't need a home-working freeloader here.
A home-working freeloader? How can currently jobless say such a thing? And who do they think is paying for this household expenses? It's me. As I stood bewildered by my sister's outrageous statement, even my parents chimed in. That's right. Kathy, leave this house.
Your presence only makes us feel worse. You're a jinx.
All three kept repeating, get out in front of me. At that moment, my anger exploded. That's it, I've reached my limit. If this is how it's going to be, just wait. I, who had decided to take revenge on my family, packed my things and left the house with Muffin. In the end, my sister added fuel to the fire.
This is all your fault, you know. If you had just listened to me obediently, none of this would have happened. They still don't seem to understand their situation, even though hell awaits them. Well, never mind. You three enjoy yourselves in that house. Suppressing my grinning mouth, I left the house with Muffin. A few days later, as expected, my sister suddenly called. Kathy, help! The house is...
What happened to the house?
All of a sudden we were told, leave by the end of this month.
So?
What?
So what's the problem?
What do you mean, what's the problem? Why do we have to leave?
Well, I've decided to sell the house.
What?
At my words, Sandy seemed to freeze. With a trembling voice, she barely managed to get the words out.
What? What does that mean? You've decided to sell it? You don't have the authority?
Well, I do. You see, that house has been mine a month ago.
What?
Yes, I had officially received the house from my uncle. Of course, the title is in my name. It's no surprise that Sandy was shocked. I hadn't told anyone about this.
You're kidding, right? Even if the title was transferred to you by Uncle, you can't just sell it so easily.
I was worried too, but right after you told me to leave, I consulted with Uncle. He said, "The house is yours now, Kathy. Do what you want. You should get away from that stupid family as soon as possible."
What? No way.
Whether they'd been listening to my conversation with Sandy over the phone speaker or not, my parents started to make a fuss. "Hey, Kathy, cut it out. We have no other place to live if we leave the house."
That's right. It's unthinkable to do this to your own family. If you're a good daughter, show some respect to your parents.
Respect? I asked them with a quiet voice. What are you talking about? You've always looked down on me compared to Sandy. Who do you think has been supporting your life for the past few years? You all had nowhere to live, so I reluctantly let you all live with me. With an unusually strong tone, my parents were at a loss for words. Without waiting for a response, I continued. Who treated me and Muffin like nuisances and kicked us out? It was you guys, wasn't it? Trying to be happy by driving out the original resident is shameless. You people belong to hell. At my outburst, my father begged, "Please help us. We're sorry." "I don't care. Fend for yourselves, you idiots." With that, I hung up the phone with a loud click. Next, I blocked every family member's contact. Seeing me raise my voice, Muffin looked up at me with a worried woof. I held Muffin close. "I'm sorry, Muffin, for shouting. It's all right now. I will protect you." I'm really glad that I was able to get Muffin away from that family that treated him so poorly. Later on, it seems my parents and sister were forced to move out of the house at the last minute, despite their desperate clinging. With my father's meager income and my unemployed mother and sister, there's no way they can lead a decent life. According to the rumors, my sister is constantly being nagged by my parents to get a job. Their family relationship seems to be getting worse by the day. Although I have no interest in how they live, there's no doubt that their standard of living has plummeted since I left. This is indeed the case of reaping what you sow. Serves them right. Meanwhile, I'm spending my days in fulfillment with my beloved dog in a new pet-friendly apartment. I can work whenever I want, and no one can complain about it anymore. I can use my earnings solely for myself and my dog. I am extremely happy with my life now. "Muffin, let's go to the dog park today." Woof. Muffin seems more lively. Maybe it's because that noisy family is gone. From now on, I want to protect Muffin for the rest of my life and lead a peaceful life.
Seriously, you're such a fool. How can anyone be as inept as you? Fool, inept. How many times had such cruel words been hurled at me? I had vowed my eternal love to him, truly believing that we could find happiness together. That was the idea, at least, when we got married. But when I came to my senses, the so-called love had vanished somewhere. My husband's domineering attitude escalated day by day, to the point where even the care of my mother-in-law was forced upon me. Physically and emotionally, I was on the brink. If things kept going this way, I would lose my sanity. However, God did not abandon me. The person who reached out to me, teetering on the edge of despair, was none other than my mother-in-law, whom I was taking care of. My name is Mary Wagner, 30 years old. After graduating from university, I worked in a publishing company. I quit my job at the time of marriage, and now I'm a full-time housewife. My friends say they envy me. How lucky you are to be a housewife. Your husband must be earning well, they say. But my married life isn't all that happy. In fact, it might be closer to hell. The cause of this was my husband, Jack. We met through work and got married after 2 years of dating. Jack, 3 years older than me, had a slightly cool side to him, and we weren't exactly the lovey-dovey couple. Still, I loved him for his solid self-identity and mature composure. I thought we could live a peaceful, happy life together. That was my expectation. But the moment we became a married couple, his attitude completely changed. Jack, to put it plainly, was a patriarch. I realized this a few days after our marriage. I, who had listened to his desire for me to become a full-time housewife, began to devote myself to household chores from the day after our marriage. That day, too, I had made dinner in time for Jack's return and was waiting for him. Jack comes home a little past 7 p.m. He then, looking at the dinner on the table, suddenly raised his voice. "Hey, what's this meal?" "Huh? It's a gratin and salad, plus a pottage soup." "Don't mess with me. If you're going to prepare a meal for your tired husband, it should be a full-course meal." I'm sorry. The last time you said it was delicious, so... That's not an excuse. Why can't you even do such simple things? You're really over as a woman. You're just too incompetent. You don't have to say it like that, I mutter with a bit of a troubled expression, and Jack glares at me. Then suddenly he threw the salad-filled dish onto the floor. At this unexpected act, a scream-like voice slipped out. "What are you doing?" "Huh? It's because you, as a wife, can't even do the bare minimum, right? That's why I made it clear to you." "You don't have to disrespect the food like that." "Shut up. If you have time to make excuses, use your deficient brain to think more about how to become suitable as my wife, you fool." Fool? I'd been called that for the first time in my life. Sure, I've been scolded by my parents, and I've argued with my brother and friends, but I've never been subjected to such cruel words. More so, being told such things by the husband I love. It was only a few days since our marriage. I never imagined that he would throw the food on the floor just because he didn't like the dinner menu. That being said, I'm a housewife, and I'll continue to be dependent on him for our livelihood. I can't go against my husband. As a newlywed, the last thing I wanted to do was upset my husband. Since that day, I've been treading on eggshells around him. I'm extremely cautious not to step on his landmines. Every piece of laundry must be ironed meticulously. The loaded potato soup should be simple, and the seasoning of the side dishes should be well seasoned. Cleaning, even a single strand of hair on the floor, is not allowed. Living under such pressure, my nerves gradually wore thin. But without regard to me, his patriarchal dominance continued to escalate. "Hey, this shirt has a crease left in the sleeve. Don't you have eyes? I'm sorry. I'll iron it right away. I'm leaving for work now, you know. You're always so slow. I'll do it right away. You won't have time for that. Damn, you're so annoying first thing in the morning. How much more do you need to upset me to be satisfied, you incompetent woman? I'm sorry. Really, really sorry. Whenever I made a mistake, I immediately bowed my head in apology. This was also something ordered by my husband. Depending on the severity of the mistake, the level of my apology changes. This time, I was forgiven just by bowing, but when it's really bad, I have to kneel down in apology. When my mistakes continue, he sometimes even pointedly presents me with a filled-out divorce document. It's scary how you get used to things, and if you keep living like this for a year, you start to feel like you're absolutely worthless. But I can't divorce him, not in my current jobless state. I can't tell my parents, who were so happy for our marriage, that I got divorced, especially not in such a short time span. The thought of continuing to be scolded by my husband forever filled me with despair for my future. As always, I was preparing dinner this day and waiting for him to come home. My daily routine is to finish cooking before 7 p.m. and have everything ready for him to eat at any time. As soon as the front door opens, I start laying out the food. If I don't finish by the time he sits down, I'll be forced to apologize again. My husband usually takes his seat in silence, but for some reason, this day was different. As he loosened his tie, he started a conversation with me. Mary, we're moving to my parents' house this weekend. Huh? Your parents' house? You mean your mom's place? Yeah, that's right. Have all our stuff packed by then. Why all of a sudden? Jack, you've always said that you didn't want to go back to your parents' house. In response to my probing question, his cold gaze pierced me. I instinctively shut my mouth, and after a pause, he opened his. My mother fell, and it's hard for her to live on her own now. What? Then we should go there right away. She's been hospitalized for a week. We're moving when she gets discharged this weekend. And I see that's what happened. But why all of a sudden? You were so against going back to your parents' house. You can guess why, can't you? Because I can inherit wealth. Wealth? As if he was delighted by his mother's situation, he continued the conversation. Listen, my father was just an ordinary guy, but my mother's family is rich, so she has a decent amount of money. What does that have to do with what happened this time? If I act dedicated during this time, I might be able to get a hefty inheritance, right? If we, as a couple, rush over, I'm sure she'll give us the whole inheritance. For such a reason? Isn't that a bit disrespectful? Shut up. You're being supported by me, so just listen quietly. I'm sorry. Being yelled at loudly, I instinctively apologized as usual. In front of my downcast self, he proclaimed with a triumphant look. Listen, you're the one who's going to take care of my mom. From now on, you're going to work as my maid at my parents' house for the rest of your life. Maid? You mean like that? Don't talk back. Who do you think is providing for your current lifestyle? It's thanks to Jack. Right? Depending on how seriously you take care of my mother, the amount of inheritance we can get will change. So don't slack off in the care, understand? Urged to reply by him, I responded softly, yes. Seeing my obedience, he showed a satisfied smile before starting his dinner. Forcing me to care for his mother just for her inheritance? He doesn't think of me as his wife at all. To him, I'm just a housemaid. Although I knew this, being told so directly was quite a shock to me. Even so, I didn't have the courage to talk back. I was, in a sense, brainwashed, having erased my own possibilities. The next day, as per my husband's command, I began packing our belongings. We moved to my mother-in-law's place a week later to coincide with her discharge from the hospital. On the day of her discharge, Jack didn't come to the hospital, using work as an excuse. So I was the one accompanying my mother-in-law. On the way back from the hospital, my mother-in-law opened her mouth in apology. "Mary, I'm really sorry. Because of me, you're going through all this." "No, don't worry about it. I'm a housewife, and if I can support you while staying at home, then there's nothing better than that." "Thank you, but aren't you bothered by how sudden this was?" "Well, packing was a bit rushed, I guess." "I bet it was. Even I was surprised. Jack moving in with us? I wonder why he decided to do this all of a sudden. Mary, did you hear anything?" No, I didn't." It's understandable that my mother-in-law would find it strange. Jack has always disliked her, often saying things like, "She's a pain," and "I don't want to see her." Despite this, he moved in with her as soon as she was hospitalized, aiming for her inheritance. To be honest, I was taken aback by Jack's transformation. However, I couldn't tell my mother-in-law the truth. Trying not to give anything away, I pretended to be calm. From this day on, my life as a caregiver began. Adapting to the unfamiliar role of a caregiver, along with the housework in the large single-family home. Even returning to his parents' home didn't change Jack's domineering nature, and I was verbally abused almost daily when my mother-in-law wasn't around. I wasn't allowed to skimp on housework or caregiving, and my days were filled with constant activity from morning till night. This went on for about a month, until one day, as I was wiping my mother-in-law's body, she voiced her concern. "Mary, have you lost weight again?" No, don't worry about it, Mother." "Are you sure? I thought the same when you moved in. You looked a lot more worn out than when you first got married." She was right. Over the past year and a half of married life, I've lost 15 pounds. It's not that I've been skipping meals, but my appetite has certainly decreased. More than that, I don't have time to eat leisurely. My mother-in-law noticed the changes in me that even Jack hadn't. Just that fact alone made me feel a little less lonely. Not wanting to worry my mother-in-law, I forced a smile. "Don't worry about me, Mother. Just being able to have these nice chats with you every day makes me happy." "Mary, let's stop this gloomy talk. Should I wipe your other hand, Mother?" Yes, please." Then my phone suddenly rang. "Oh, it looks like it's Jack." At my mother-in-law's words, my body tensed. Jack had ordered me to answer his calls immediately. However, as I was holding a wet towel, I couldn't answer right away. But I knew if I didn't respond promptly, Jack would be furious again. Using my elbow, I managed to hit the answer button and switch the call to speaker. "Hello?" I replied. The moment I answered, a loud, angry voice came from the other end of the line. "Hey, don't mess around!" it shouted. "Why didn't you answer immediately?" I'm sorry, I was a bit occupied." "What? A maid should answer at the first ring." "But I was in the middle of something and couldn't." "Didn't I always tell you not to talk back? You're so annoying. Why are you so incompetent?" I'm sorry." "You're taking proper care of the old lady, right? The amount of inheritance depends on how well you do your job. Do you get that? Being berated in front of my mother-in-law brought a rush of shame. He repeatedly insulted me, calling me incompetent and annoying, and then abruptly hung up the phone. After Jack's call ended, a heavy silence filled the room. It was broken by none other than my mother-in-law. Mary, that was Jack, right? Does he always talk to you like that? Yes, but it's my fault. I am incompetent. What are you saying? You're such a kind and good girl. Mom. I can't overlook this, Mary. It's time to get back at him. Huh? My mother-in-law then suggested a plan. Following her instructions, I threw all of Jack's belongings into the yard and locked the front door. Together we waited for Jack to come home. A few hours later, we could hear rattling noises from the entrance. It must have been Jack, but of course the locked door wouldn't open. Despite the intercom ringing, I ignored it just as my mother-in-law had instructed. Finally, my phone started ringing. It was Jack. I switched the call to speaker and answered. Hello? He started off shouting immediately. Hey, don't mess around. Open the front door right now. I can't do that. What? What are you saying? This is at the order of your mother. What? Unable to comprehend, he repeatedly shouted, Don't mess around, and open it now. To him, my mother-in-law let out a cold voice. The one messing around is you, you fool. Mom? I always knew you were cold, but I never thought you'd treat your wife like this. No, that's not. I knew something was off when you suddenly moved in. To use your wife and rely on inheritance. How can you live such a shameful life? No, that's not true. What's not true? I have no intention of leaving you any inheritance. If you understand, get lost. This is my house. You will never be allowed back in. Flustered by my mother-in-law's words, Jack began pounding on the door. Through the phone, I could hear him begging, Please, do something. I have an ally, my mother-in-law. I won't be brainwashed any longer. With resolution, I said firmly to Jack on the phone, I want a divorce. I can't go on with you anymore. What? What are you saying? Shut up. I'm done being married to a man like you. I don't waste my life anymore. I won't give up on my own life. I've decided to carve out my own happiness. Don't joke around. You can't live without me. There's nothing I can't do. No matter how tough it gets, it's better than being with you. I will overcome anything. I will no longer need you in my life. I refuse to have a trash like you. I abruptly hung up the phone and blocked his contact. His yelling could be heard from outside, but it eventually changed to cries of despair. My mother-in-law reported this to the police. For his nuisance behavior, he was taken away by officers. I used the divorce papers he had given me before to formally divorce him. On top of that, I sued him for compensation through a lawyer for mental and physical distress. With the witness of my mother-in-law, the proceedings went smoothly. After paying the lump sum compensation to me, Jack's savings were exhausted. In addition, he lost his position at his company after they found out about his police records, and he was reduced to an ordinary employee. Naturally, my mother-in-law refused to pass down her inheritance to Jack. After a discussion with the lawyer, in accordance with my mother-in-law's wish to leave everything to me, it was decided that she would transfer me about $1 million per year. I continue to care for my mother-in-law at her house. It's about the only thing I can do for her now. Mary, I'm so sorry for always troubling you. Even after divorcing Jack, you're still taking care of me. Why are you saying that, Mom? I should be the one thanking you. Really, I'm so fortunate to have a daughter like you. Same here. Let's keep supporting each other, okay? My life with my mother-in-law is filled with more smiles than I could have imagined. I'll do my best to do what I can for her until the end of her life.
My name is Louise. I'm turning 34 this year. After graduating from college, I got a job at what one would call a major corporation. Our company, known to just about anyone, offered a decent salary, even for new hires. However, a high salary came with a price. I had to travel for business or training about half of the month, and working overtime and on holidays was usual. It was a pretty tough job, but I felt fulfilled. By the time I turned 28, I was promoted to be the department head, a quick progression, pretty rare for a woman. 4 years ago, I married my boyfriend of 2 years, Brian. We met through a mutual friend. I wasn't particularly interested in dating, but my friend, concerned for me, introduced him to me. I had no particular desire to marry, thinking that I could live my entire life single. Brian, however, said from the start, I want to get married soon. I want kids too. Raising them when we're older is going to be harder, right? I didn't want children, and I found the thought of getting married to be absurd when we hardly knew each other. Plus, I had just been promoted and couldn't think about getting married and pregnant. Even when Brian brought up the topic of marriage, I would gently reject it, saying, "You're rushing. We need to get to know each other better. Besides, with marriage, it's not going to be just about us." To this, Brian suggested, Okay. Then let's get married after dating for 2 years? By then, we'd know each other well, right? At the time, I thought we wouldn't last 2 years, but in the end, we dated for 2 years, and then got married. During our relationship, he was faithful, wasn't a gambler, and was sincere and kind to me. I saw him as a hardworking and diligent person when it came to his work. However, his great ego was something that had always bothered me a bit. When a senior at work would point out something to him, he would rant at home, saying, "I did it because I thought it was the best, but they act so bossy. I don't have to be told what to do." Listening to him in detail, it was clear he was being called out for his mistakes, but it seemed like he couldn't stand being criticized, whether it was by a superior or not. When we decided to have dinner with both families for greetings, for some reason, he picked a restaurant that charged over $200 per person and asked me to pay half since it was so expensive. I suggested a less expensive place, but Brian insisted. "This is important. If I choose a cheap restaurant, they'll think I'm stingy," and wouldn't listen. If that's the case, he should handle it all himself. But he said, "I can't cover 8 people with my salary. At most, maybe 3. So please cover the remaining 5, and ended up asking me to pay more than half. We had 4 people from each family, making a total of 8. So Brian was saying we should meet at an over $200 per person restaurant, even though he couldn't even cover his family's share. I wasn't quite happy when he brought up this plan, and I was even more puzzled when he told everyone at the dinner, "Don't worry about the bill today, I'll take care of it." But everyone seemed happy, and I thought I should let him take the lead in this situation. So I swallowed my words. Looking back, I think I might have made a mistake. I regret not calling off my marriage to Brian, a man so full of himself. Brian's attitude towards me changed completely after we got married. He began to talk to me in a condescending manner all the time. Before we got married, he knew I was busy with work and said he would help with household chores. However, after we got married, he started saying things like, "What would the neighbors think if they saw a man hanging out laundry? Besides, household chores are a woman's job, right? I'm out working hard, so let me relax at home." He never lifted a finger to help, no matter how busy I was. Does he really think people would be fazed by seeing a man putting out laundry? I was fed up with his domineering attitude, but I didn't mind doing the housework, so I could tolerate it. What ticked me off was the fact that Brian was giving money to his parents. Although Brian's parents were farmers, they seemed to be struggling to make ends meet. Seems like they never made much in the past either. And now that they were nearing their 70s, farming was becoming more difficult. Because of this, they would frequently call Brian to send them some money. At first, I thought it couldn't be helped since they were struggling. But within 6 months of getting married, Brian started giving all his salary to his parents. Brian wouldn't contribute any money for our living expenses. I once told him, "This is so much. It's ridiculous to cover all the living expenses with my salary alone." But Brian replied, "How can you say such a thing when my family is in trouble? They're your family too. Besides, you make more money than I do, so you should be able to live just fine," and wouldn't listen to me. On the phone with his parents, Brian always said, "It's fine. I'm taking care of it with my salary. I won't let her say anything about it." It was as if he was only sending part of his salary. But in fact, he was giving all of his salary to his parents. He had no money left for himself and started asking me for pocket money, saying, "Can you give me about $200? I won't even be able to afford lunch at this rate." I finally decided I couldn't continue living this way and suggested, "Let's decide on a monthly limit for the amount we send to your parents. Please find a way to cover your lunch expenses on your own." But Brian would always say, "Got it, we'll do that." But he kept sending all his monthly salary to his parents. That was the one thing I couldn't stand, no matter what. One day, I had to be away from home for about 2 weeks for a business trip. From Brian, I got a, "What? 2 weeks? What am I gonna eat then? And what about my laundry?" Even though he knew I had a job that required frequent travel. When I, annoyed at his childishness, said, "Figure it out yourself. You're a grown man. If you can't, why don't you go home while I'm away? You'll eat good there, right?" Brian reluctantly agreed. 2 weeks later, when I returned home, for some reason, Brian's sister Elizabeth was at home. She lived a little away from us, and we hadn't seen each other since our wedding. As I was wondering if something had happened, Elizabeth, seeing my face, said, "Hi, Louise. It's been a while." "Oh, that's right. The money. It was a lifesaver. Thank you so much." With a beaming smile, saying things that made no sense to me. Without even having the time to put away my luggage, I asked Elizabeth, "Money? What are you talking about?" Then Elizabeth, without any hesitation, said, "Huh? Brian said that since you have some savings, he'd provide for my startup capital. He told me not to worry because that's at least $1 million. I didn't understand at all. At that moment, Brian entered the room holding my passbook and seal. As soon as Brian saw my face, he said, "Oh, welcome back. Good timing. I'm going to give your savings to Elizabeth. You know Elizabeth, she's a nail artist, right? She's always wanted her own shop. It seems like she's been saving her own money, but she's about $1 million short. I remember that the savings you've had since you were single is exactly $1 million, so I told her to come get it." He then handed the passbook and seal to Elizabeth, saying with a smile, "You're lucky. This will make your dream come true. Be grateful, okay?" I couldn't hold back anymore and snapped, "What are you talking about? That's my money. Why are you deciding that on your own? I mean, I could understand if you said you'd lend it. We'd need a promissory note and a promise to pay back a certain amount each month, right? Without doing any of that, what do you mean you're going to give away someone else's savings?" I then took the passbook and seal back from Elizabeth. Brian looked at me and said, "What? We're family, aren't we? It's ridiculous to write a promissory note for family members. Besides, we're not lending this. We're giving it. You don't even have a hobby because you're always working, right? It's a waste to just hold on to money. Elizabeth has a dream. Isn't it more meaningful to use it to make that dream come true?" And then he glared at me. Upon hearing Brian's words, I understood he was someone I couldn't communicate with. Just when I thought it was a waste of time to continue the conversation, Brian said, "This money is too good for you, so I'm giving it to Elizabeth. You'd only waste it. You can just work and save up again. Understand? If you still want to argue, we'll get divorced." Seeing this as an opportunity, an idea sparked my mind. I quickly responded, "All right, let's get a divorce. I'll write up the divorce papers and send them to you. I'll come pick up my things soon." Until the divorce is finalized, I'll stay at a hotel. Bye for now. And with that, I grabbed my luggage from a business trip and left the house swiftly. Brian was stunned by my sudden decision, but after a while, he sent multiple texts saying things like, "You can still come back if you apologize now," and "Elizabeth says she'll forgive you for what happened today, as long as you give her the money. So stop being stubborn and come back." I ignored all his texts. Who does he think he is? The next day, I went to the city hall and mailed the signed divorce papers back home. Even then, he kept texting me, saying things like, "Are you really sure about this? I'm going to submit the divorce papers, okay?" I only responded with, "Please submit them as soon as possible," and ignored all the other texts. The divorce with Brian was finalized sooner than I thought. A week after the divorce was finalized, I timed it with when Brian was at work and moved my things to my new house. When Brian texted me about submitting the divorce papers, he had said, "I feel great being able to divorce an ugly woman like you. We are strangers now. Make sure you divide our property properly since we're divorced." So, I didn't take most of the furniture and appliances. At the same time, I deposited half of the small savings I had accumulated during our marriage into his bank account and left it there. That night, I got multiple calls from Brian. At first, I ignored them, thinking, "Here we go." But after a while, I started getting calls from Elizabeth, too. Finally, I picked up the damn phone, and Brian immediately yelled, "Hey, what happened to our property division? This is ridiculous. There's only $800 in this account." Well, I was thinking to myself, it's exactly as I expected. I told Brian, "See, I did split the property. We originally had $1,600 in our joint account, right? I left you with half of it, so $800. And all the furniture and appliances were purchased after our marriage, so I left them all behind. That's a fair property division too, isn't it?" Just to make it clear, I got less than you. But Brian was not convinced. He said, "What are you talking about? You're supposed to have $1 million in your savings, right? So half of that, $500,000, should be mine, right? Plus, you have an inheritance from your grandpa died, right? That inheritance should be half mine too." I was flabbergasted and couldn't help but laugh. I saw this coming. Otherwise, I don't think Brian would have agreed to file for divorce so easily. I managed to hold back my laughter and explained, "Listen, Brian, division of property refers to the division of marital assets. My savings from when I was single and the inheritance I received do not fall under marital assets. I don't know who you heard about property division from, but I consulted a lawyer and split our marital assets properly. The money we saved after getting married was actually all earned by me. You never contributed to our household expenses, remember? Be grateful that I even divided that." Brian said, "You're lying. There's no way that's true. You can't fool me. Hand it over properly, or I'll sue you," he desperately yelled with a shaky voice. But I calmly told him, "Go ahead. If you can sue me, then do it. I haven't deceived you in any way. Plus, I've done the property division fairly. I'm not afraid of being sued." Upon hearing this, Brian flusteredly said, "Wait! Let's forget about the divorce. I was wrong. Come back to me." He completely backpedaled and asked for reconciliation. I replied, "What are you talking about? The divorce has already been finalized, and I have absolutely no intention of going back. This is not a joke." And then I added, "Since this is the end, let me tell you, if you plan on continuing to live there, you have to pay the rent yourself. The rent is about $1,800 a month. You probably didn't know because you've never paid for it." When I said this, Brian replied in a weak voice, "There's no way I can afford that." If he can't pay, then he just has to leave. That's none of my business anymore. After that, it seems that Brian went back to his parents' house because he couldn't afford the rent. Unable to come up with the moving expenses, Brian sold the furniture and appliances I left behind for moving expenses. His parents thought Brian was making a decent amount of money and happily welcomed him, thinking it would make their lives easier. But in reality, Brian wasn't able to give them as much money as when he was with me, and he seems to be quite uncomfortable staying there. Elizabeth had been told by Brian not to worry about money and had started preparing to start her own business. But since she couldn't get a penny of my savings, it seems that the startup plan came to a halt. Moreover, it seems that she suffered a loss because she had to cancel the preparations she had started. Brian seems to have been given a hard time by Elizabeth as well, but that's not my problem. I'm currently focusing on my work while living alone. I've had enough of marriage. I still get messages from Brian saying he wants to get back together, but I completely ignore them. It was kind of funny to hear him report his situation to me every now and then, so I let it be. But I'm planning to block him soon.
We're able to live because of the hard work of our farmers. I insist to my soon-to-be father-in-law, but my words fall on deaf ears. He mocks farming as a job that's not profitable. He even laughs, challenging me to show him the life of a farmer. Fine, let him see my family farm. He'll regret his words soon enough. My name is Henry. I used to work in sales, but when my dad's health deteriorated, I took over the family farm. I'm the second son, but my elder brother moved overseas for work. That left me as the only one to continue the family business. I have a sweet and strong-willed fiancé. I fell head over heels for Ellie the moment I saw her working at our regular cafe, and that's how our relationship started. 2 years into dating, she accepted my marriage proposal. So here I am, about to meet Ellie's parents. Gosh, I'm nervous, I mutter, looking up at the luxurious high-rise where Ellie's parents live. Don't worry, Henry. I've already talked to my mom about you. But my dad, well, that's another story. I've heard her father is a stern man who owns a few restaurants. As nervous as I was, I go in and greet them. To my relief, both warmly welcome me. Sorry that we haven't been able to sync our schedules because of my busy work, the father-in-law began, and started elaborating on how well his company was doing. Henry, I hear you're the top performer in sales. You must be making good money, right? Do you have plans on where you want to live in the future? How about moving into this high-rise condo? All I could do was force a smile at the rapid-fire questions. You're being rude to Henry, said the mother-in-law as she served the tea. Thank you. This tea is quite good. The delicious flavor helped ease my tension. Oh, I'm glad you like it. My brother grows the tea leaves. Our family home has a tea plantation, and they always send us the fresh tea. The conversation took a lively turn as my mother-in-law and I chatted about the tea. My father-in-law then huffed and said, "A tea plantation, how antiquated. Few households drink tea these days. I wonder when your family home will go out of business." His disparaging remark about her family home left my mother-in-law looking downcast. I had heard somewhere that tea plantations aren't as profitable as they used to be. It's labor-intensive work that requires skill and, above all, manpower. Still, seeing my mother-in-law so disheartened, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. We owe our livelihood to the farmers who work hard to produce our food. We're able to live thanks to the people who grow crops. The same is true for tea. I'm sure many people find comfort in the delicious taste of this tea. At my words, my father-in-law scowled. I seemed to have put him in a bad mood. The timing couldn't have been worse, but I took a deep breath and blurted out, I've decided to quit my job and take over the family farm. I've decided to protect the land that's been passed down through the generations. Ellie has accepted this, so please, support us in the future. The moment I announced that I had taken over the farm, my father-in-law's face turned red with anger. A farmer? I agreed to meet you because you were the top-performing sales guy. Ellie, did you lie to me? My father-in-law His face filled with anger turned to Ellie. "I've tried to talk to you about this many times, but you were too busy. Besides, Mom supports our decision," Ellie said, sighing. She must have known it would come to this. Upon hearing that I had switched from my job to farming, my father-in-law's attitude changed dramatically. It was a parade of prejudice against farmers. How dare a poor person living in an old house talk about getting married? It's embarrassing to tell people that my daughter's husband is a farmer and so on. When asked what I was growing, I answered mainly cherry tomatoes, and he exclaimed, "Cherry tomatoes? They don't seem to make much money and there's no future in them." "Of course we're growing more than just tomatoes," I tried to explain, but my father-in-law cut me off and started laughing. "Growing a variety of vegetables is proof that you're not making a profit." He dismissed whatever I said. My father-in-law started a restaurant business at a young age and was successful, so he's particular about profits. Although I've just taken over the farm, I've certainly been considering profits. But as I tried to discuss this, my father-in-law shook his head dismissively. He didn't expect much from me. "I'd like to see what life as a farmer is like. Is your house a shack? Are your parents wearing overalls and straw hats while working? Maybe I should meet them next time." I was getting angry at him making fun of my house and parents, but the one who protested angrily was Ellie. "I can't believe you're making fun of farmers. I'm ashamed to be your daughter." At Ellie's words, my father-in-law was enraged and slapped her on the cheek. My mother-in-law was angry that he had raised his hand against her daughter. Ellie, with tears from the pain, turned the situation into complete chaos. "You're living in this high-rise condo thanks to me. Be grateful. I don't care who a daughter like you marries." I took Ellie, who was sobbing, and left my in-laws' house. I couldn't forgive my father-in-law for making fun of farming and for hitting Ellie. "Hello, it's Henry. I'll be bringing my fiancée and her parents next time." I called my father and reported every word of my father-in-law's remarks. "He runs restaurants, doesn't he? What's the name of it?" he asked, so I told him my father-in-law's name and the name of the restaurants he runs. "I have an idea, so wait for me." I asked what he meant by an idea, but he said he was still uncertain and hung up the phone. After a while, my father called back. After hearing from my father, I immediately went to meet some people. Later, Ellie and I went to greet my mother-in-law again. She apologized for my father-in-law's arrogant attitude. He had apparently become arrogant since his restaurant business took off. He moved into a high-rise condo to show off to people around him and began to look down on those who earned less than him. It was a daily occurrence for him to ridicule her family's tea farm. His affairs with women were not hidden, and he did as he pleased, according to my mother-in-law. She said she endured it all for her daughter. "I don't want to cause trouble for Ellie and Henry by getting a divorce." My mother-in-law is a kind person who thinks of Ellie and me. "Don't worry about us. Please think of your own happiness." When I said that, she thanked me and smiled. "I want to help my brother who inherited our family's tea farm. I don't want to see the farm that has been handed down for generations go out of business." "You reminded me of the importance of tea farm, Henry. So I'm going to divorce him and go back to my parents' home." It seemed that my mother-in-law's resolution is already made. The day came when I took my in-laws to my parents' home. After getting off the airplane, we drove for another hour. There were vast fields and farms around us. "I can't believe there are houses where people live in such a rural area," my father-in-law spat out in the car. Ellie and my mother-in-law obviously looked uncomfortable, but patient. probably because he could say he wanted to go home if a quarrel started here. I'm looking forward to see the life of a farmer. Is the toilet outside or something? My father-in-law ridiculed my home, laughing uproariously. You'll see when we get there. After driving a while, we saw a large gate and high walls. I'm back. I brought everyone with me. When I spoke to the intercom, the gate opened automatically. What a grand gate! Oh, and the garden is so beautiful! Ellie followed me, cheerfully praising the scenery. We leave the garden to a gardener, but it's an English garden, so it's called. Because of my parents who love Europe, there were many of my mother's favorite roses planted. My mother-in-law entered the garden and happily sniffed the scent of the roses. My father-in-law grumbled that it was a bad taste garden. Please, this way. There is a large building beyond the large garden. That is my family home. The brick-built house has 12 rooms and living, dining, kitchen. It's quite spacious. In front of the entrance, there are 2 luxury cars and 3 off-road motorcycles parked. All the land around our house is our own farmland. My in-laws and Ellie were all agape. My parents greeted us at the entrance. Looking at my father-in-law, they showed a smile. Of course, they are not wearing overalls. When I entered the living room, there were relatives and some people gathered. Not only my parents, but everyone was dressed in suits. My father-in-law, insisting that formal attire is unnecessary when meeting farmers, had come in his usual attire of a t-shirt and jeans. Because my mother-in-law, Ellie, and I were dressed relatively formally, he stood out significantly. Hello. Perhaps feeling out of place? My father-in-law said in a small voice, looking down in embarrassment. My father introduced them to the relatives. This is Ellie, Henry's fiancée, and these are Ellie's parents. It seems like Ellie's father has quite a prejudice against farmers. Were you surprised to see that our home was not a shabby hut? The gaze the relatives cast upon my father-in-law was cold. It seemed that my father-in-law had told everyone the story I had told him. No, I mean, that's not... As my father-in-law stammered, several men stepped forward. Why are you guys here? My father-in-law looked surprised with widened eyes. We are disappointed in you, one of the men said, looking at my father-in-law. These men were organic farmers who were actually supplying vegetables to the restaurants my father-in-law runs. Hearing the name of the store, my father made connections and contacted these farmers. My father, who has been a farmer for many years, has many acquaintances. I had directly met them and conveyed my father-in-law's remarks. Apparently, my father-in-law had always been arrogant, and there were many complaints. Those who were outraged that he looked down on farmers so much had come today to directly voice their complaints. We would like to terminate our business relationship at the end of the next contract. Everyone nodded when one of the farmers said this. Wait a minute. Our specialty is organic vegetables. My father-in-law runs several Italian restaurants featuring vegetables popular among the women. Despite this, I thought it was unbelievable to make fun of the farmers who produce the vegetables. I guess for him, anything is fine as long as it makes a profit. He had set his sights on organic vegetables because he thought dumb women should bite if he touted them as healthy food. While my father-in-law was flustered at being told they wanted to stop trading, he is a businessman. He seemed to think that the farmers would also be in trouble if the contract ends. Are you sure about this? You're gonna lose your income, you know. Perhaps he regained his composure and began to threaten, acting high and mighty. Don't worry about that. I interjected, anticipating that my father-in-law would say something like this. The farmers had said they wanted to quit dealing with my father-in-law's company, but they would be in trouble if their source of income decreased. Through my sales job, I had made connections with so many people in various industries. Among them were many restaurant owners and food manufacturers. Even if they extended the deal with my father-in-law, I had introduced them to the next place they could do business, so they wouldn't be in trouble. When I told this fact, my father-in-law visibly started trembling. What am I supposed to do if I can't get vegetables? To my father-in-law, who held his head in his hands, my father said this: "Why not ask Henry? We also grow organic vegetables." Despite the ridicule from my father-in-law, we had started focusing on organic farming in our fields, including cherry tomatoes. As a result of repeated improvement in the variety, we were able to harvest quite sweet vegetables. We even had several invitations from companies wanting to contract with us. My father-in-law quickly turned to me, but I just smiled and said, "Of course, we refuse to do business." He slumped his shoulders and fell silent. Next to the quietened father-in-law, my mother-in-law and our parents were having a lively conversation.
"When I bring the fresh tea from my hometown next time,"
my mother-in-law declared, as my parents were thrilled. In the car on the way back, my father-in-law exploded in anger. "How dare you cancel the deal? Do you want my business to go bankrupt?" He was shouting from the back seat. Frankly, I couldn't care less about what happens to his restaurant. "And you, as my wife, not even defending me. This is why I hate country women." Perhaps because I was completely ignoring him, his anger turned towards my mother-in-law.
"Sure, you prefer city women, right? Your current favorite is Mary, isn't it?"
When my mother-in-law calmly started talking, the car fell silent.
"Henry paid to hire a detective. You didn't hide it at all, so the evidence was easy to obtain. Please take care of the divorce documents and the alimony payments."
My father-in-law turned pale at her words. "Divorce? What are you saying? How do you plan to survive without my earnings?" She told him she planned to work on the tea farm her brother inherited after the divorce. Then my father-in-law smirked and said, "Isn't that tea farm on the verge of bankruptcy? Fine, I'll divorce you. It's better to live with a young woman than an aging wife." Then, no one spoke a word, and a heavy silence filled the car. When we arrived at the airport, not wanting to be together any longer, my father-in-law headed towards the gate alone. Ellie, looking at her father's back, muttered sadly,
"To think such a man as my father."
"I think your father will definitely regret his choice," I said, pulling Ellie's shoulder towards me. A few days later, my in-laws' divorce was finalized. Due to the evidence of his affair, he was fully liable. He seemed to have nearly forced my mother-in-law, saying, "I'll give you money, just leave." Ellie and I were angry when we heard the story, but my mother-in-law was laughing, saying it was okay since she got a lot of money. $50,000 in alimony from my father-in-law, and $15,000 in alimony from his mistress. She plans to use this money to revive the tea farm. While my father-in-law was enjoying himself at his high-rise condo with his mistress, her husband barged in, turning the place into a battlefield. Yes, my father-in-law's mistress was a married woman. We had known that when we had the detective investigate, so we thought it wouldn't end well. My father-in-law, who was also being sued for alimony by his mistress's husband, must have learned his lesson about women. Even after that, it seems like he's still living alone in his high-rise condo. His bad reputation spread among the farmers, and the number of farms willing to do business with him drastically decreased. That led him to close his branches, which were centered around organic vegetables. Perhaps feeling lonely, I heard that letters from my father-in-law occasionally arrive at my mother-in-law's parents' house. The content is pathetic, asking her to come back because he's lonely. At first, my mother-in-law was reading the letters, but now she says she just throws them away without opening them. Once he called, she cut him off, saying,
If you're lonely, why don't you move out of the high rise?
We laughed when we heard that from her. We don't know whether he couldn't stand living alone in a large room or whether his business went under and he couldn't afford to live in the high rise anymore. But we heard that he moved to a small apartment. I've been extremely busy since I took over the farm, but having Ellie with me is a big support. She probably never thought she'd become a farmer's wife when we were dating. Yet, she came with me without a word of complaint, so I have nothing but gratitude for her.
I think I like farming. It must be my mom's blood.
Ellie, laughing, is adorable. A year later, we had our wedding. It was a grand ceremony, but my father-in-law was not there. He must be sad that he couldn't attend his only daughter's wedding. From my mother-in-law, we received freshly packed new tea, saying she wanted us to serve it to the guests. Thanks to my mother-in-law's help, the tea farm, which was on the verge of bankruptcy, seemed likely to turn a significant profit. Their tea is still fragrant and delicious, as always.